in the 13th chapter of Matthew, Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all your seeds, yet when it grows it is the largest of garden plants. It can become a tree so that the birds of the air come and perch in its branches. And again, another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour until it worked all through the dough. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. And when he found one of great value, he went away, sold everything he had, and bought it. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake, caught all kinds of fish. And when the net was full, the fishermen pulled it to the shore. And they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, and the bad they threw away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angel will come and separate the wicked from the righteous, throw them into a fiery furnace where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all these things? And they said yes. And Jesus said, therefore, every teacher of the law who has been instructed about the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out his storeroom new treasures as well as old. The word from the Lord in the house of the Lord. We make deals. And when we make a deal, we have to live with it. Or we're supposed to. A man's word is his greatest possession. For his reputation is what he lives on. I'm picking on the men now. The ladies have the same deal. Laban was a shyster. But so was Jacob. Jacob cheated his brother and then ran for his life. I was the youngest of 4 boys. I knew better than to cheat my brothers because they were faster than I was. Otherwise, I could have done it too. And he went to Laban, and Laban said, you know, you've been working with me for all this time. And he said, you're not taking any wages. I got to do something for you. And he said, I want to marry your daughter. Seems fair deal to me. This is as we hear about this wedding night and so forth, here's where so many of our wedding traditions come in. The reason you don't see the bride on the day of the wedding until the wedding is because, generally speaking, in those days, the groom never saw the wife, never saw the bride until sunup on the morning after their wedding night. Never saw them. She came heavily veiled to be married, and they retired to the bridal chambers in the dark, and in the morning we said, ooh, look who's here. It's why brides wear veils. It's because in the old days you didn't look upon a single woman's face. You didn't see the bride because the marriage was arranged. But here he knew Leah, and he knew Rachel, and he was in love with Rachel. The only thing it mentions about Leah is that she was a bit cross-eyed. Just a little bit, not much. Some of you guys are smiling, you know that story too. But he stayed 7 years and wound up married to Leah. And Laban simply said, well, you know the tradition. The younger can't be married before the older. So Jacob knew he was trying to circumvent the tradition, the long-standing tradition of the way things were done. And so he stayed another 7 years. It again, we get into numbers in the Bible, and they're not always quite what they seem. Sometimes it talks about 7 days and they mean 7 years. Sometimes it talks about 7 weeks and it means 7 decades. Sometimes it talks about 7 years and it may be only a brief time. Because the 7 is a complete number. It's long enough for it to have happened. So we don't know whether he worked 14 years or not. But we do know that he stuck out the deal at this time. And he wound up with 2 wives, which was pretty common in those days. But Jacob complained because he was married to Leah, but he knew the tradition. He knew what to expect. And one of the things that we have trouble with in this day and age is that there aren't those traditions that we can count on. There aren't those historic ways of doing things that matter to us. So everything's a brand new deal. Everything rests on the honesty of the participants. We bought a house in Wisconsin. We were moving from out of state, and I went into the bank and I said to the bank president, I got to talk to him. We want to buy this house and I need to borrow this much money. Now remember, this is 45 years ago, so it wasn't near the amount of money. And he said, our loan committee meets tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, call me at 11. I called him at 11 and said, it's okay, come on in. And we'll put the money in an account and you can do the deal. The last time we refinanced, I signed 103 pages. And the only reason for 103 pages is because no one's word is as good as it used to be. The promises that we make to each other aren't kept. I don't mean you and me, it's the rest of the world. And some of you dealt with these people who make promises, who accept payments and forget to do the work, who do shoddy work and claim it's well done, and so on. But the reason that we used to do things on a handshake was because a man's word was his bond. And now it takes 103 pages to replace a handshake because we don't trust anyone. How many of you pay up front for a job you're going to have done somewhere down the line? We've learned because we've been burned. And because someone does something to us, we don't trust anyone. And yet, just a little, I didn't want it to be a bee. But we do trust a few people. You can probably count on one hand the number of people who say, I'll do that and it's done. There are more than that in this church because the people I ask to do things do things. Jesus gave his word to his disciples. He gave his word to those people around him that his promises were good and true. And what a tough thing it is to try to live up to a reputation that is sterling silver. It's easy to live down to a reputation that's mud. But it's tough. You have to do things you don't want to do because you promised you would do them. I'm not sure Jesus liked us, as I said, liked us enough to do what he did for us. But I'm supremely confident he loved us enough to do what he did for us. In his parables, he talks about the things of great value. The man who found a treasure in a field and then bought the field so the treasure would be his. Not quite upstanding. Nowadays, the previous owner would have sued him as soon as he had the treasure, and the lawyers would have got rich. And they'd have both wound up with nothing. because it takes 103 pages to replace a handshake. The man who was seeking for beautiful pearls found the best pearl in the world and sold everything so he would own a pearl. But is it enough? Is that pearl the love of God? Is that pearl the relationship with Christ? Or is that something that he would take home and put on a pedestal in his living room and spend his time admiring? What good? What good is a beautiful pearl sitting on your mantle? Ladies, wear pearls if you got them. Wear them every day, because someday you can't. If they make you feel good, wear them. If you have the faith of a grain of mustard seed, you can do anything in God's name that you want to do. If you have enough faith. I try to keep my goals and estimations way down here, just in case my faith isn't quite as big as a grain of mustard seed. But God calls on me to do things sometimes I don't want to do. I've never married Leah. It has never been that bad. But I've been called to labor for God for something and not even knowing what it is. But we can't shortchange our deals with God. We can't cheat God. He'll know. We may think we got away with something. He knows. We may think we beat the system. He knows. But unless we can trust His promises as we can, then if we can trust His promises, we don't need 103 pages of assurance. We don't need 66 books in the Bible to assure us. We know in our hearts that His word is good and true. His promises are kept. Neither Jacob nor Laban made promises that they planned on keeping. They went with the flow. They went with what would happen and what would be good for them instead of true to their word. But sometimes we have to be true to our traditions as well. Sometimes we get into deals that look so good and we know they can't be. I've never fallen for the Moroccan lottery scam yet. But they keep sending it in, and the money gets bigger every time. It's growing. How many times have we made promises to ourselves and failed to keep them? Those are sacred promises. Those are things that you have to do if you're going to maintain a true relationship with God. If your word isn't good to yourself, it can't be good to anyone else. It can't be what God needs of you. A handshake or 103 pages. Your choice. Amen. Okay, we're going to Precious Name, number 536. And would you stand with me?